Hey, Ray, hand me that AR.
You are now listening to Off the Rip.
Man, welcome back to Off the Rip. We in Orlando with it. We got Alex Onaindia in the house, you all. Somebody that's really big time, what you call him, the CEO and founder of an amazing agency. This is our first agent on the podcast, and we just happy we get to come down to Florida, a beautiful area, and just get to do this podcast with you. Thank you for being on here today.
I'm humbled for you guys to come down. Excited to chat.
No, for real. So just Alex, we just want to get in to know who you are and how was it. I would say your upbringing. Like who is Alex Onaindia?
Man, it's a long story, but I'll try to distill it down. My father's an immigrant, first generation American, born in Spain. Moved to the United States when he was 18 to play a sport most people don't know called highlight.
Okay.
So
I never heard of that. Can you explain to that what that is?
So highlight, long story short, they play with a ball and basically a basket. It's called like a cesta, and it kind of looks a little bit like handball, but they're throwing a ball like 100 miles an hour on a wall. Very popular in Spain, and then in the 80s and 90s, it was popular in the States, primarily cities like Miami, Orlando, and then up in the Northeast.
Gotcha.
Big gambling component to it, kind of like horse racing, not the athletes, but people will go watch, make their Friday night trifectas, all of that. And so my dad was an athlete, met my mom when she was in college, and he was playing up in Rhode Island. 15 years later, he retired from that sport, went into IT, and went to school, built a whole new second career. Which is interesting because I talk a lot to athletes about, thinking about what's after sports. And so, I was around sport from a young age, obviously a non-traditional, not your football or basketball, but I saw it. Grew up with brother and sister, my sister's special needs as well. So always have had empathy for other people and situations they're going through, and grew up here in Orlando. Always a sports fan, but very interested in the business of sports too. I was always reading, not just the standings or the stat sheets, but the contracts, the salary cap, all of that. And when it became time to go to school, I was like, I think I want to go to Florida State and study sport management. And that's kind of how it got started. Any questions before we go further?
No, definitely. Did you play any sports yourself?
Yeah, so I played primarily basketball.
Okay. You're pretty tall, so I was guessing you was a hooper.
I like to say I was a little before my time, and that I was a tall guy who liked to shoot, but the coaches liked to put me in the post. And I'm like, nah, I'm not like that. I'm not gonna turn around and dunk on you. Like I wanted to be picking, popping, and hitting those threes. But I loved basketball. Fortunate to play with and against some great players too, especially in the AAU scene. And then high school here in Orlando, we had quite a few D1 hoopers and even a couple that went to the NBA. So definitely was fun to be around. But I knew, in high school that was probably going to be it, unless I wanted to go chase D3 somewhere, which I was good. I wanted to go to a big school.
So your mom was you kind of already accepted that you wasn't going to like pro and everything. You wasn't
we knew. In hindsight, I probably should have played like a sport like volleyball where I would have had a better chance. But no, I loved basketball. Like I said, probably could have chased it at a low level D3 type thing. But I always had the dream, especially growing up in Florida, Florida State. Like those were the schools. Like those teams were playing. Like you see everybody repping one of those colors, even if they didn't go to school there. You go to Publix and they have the cakes, one is orange and blue, one's carne and gold, and like that's always what I wanted. So it was going to be one or the other.
You just want to be a part of that culture. So going to Florida State, what you call them, just getting into like sports management and just having a love for just the sports. Because I never really heard nobody say, like, thinking a little bit more deeper, like just looking at the contracts and the numbers of side of things. How did you get like fall in love with it, like that part of it? Because I literally never heard nobody say that before.
So I was a fan of all sports, but my favorite sports are basketball and football. And in the NBA, in some ways the off season trumps the season when it comes to like free agency and July 1 and like who's going to sign the max deal. And so I remember the summer of 2000, I was 9 years old, a diehard Orlando Magic fan already. We had a ton of salary cap space. I'm like, what does this mean? And I'm reading up, and Tim Duncan, Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady are all free agents. And Orlando is going for all three. They're trying to make it work. They get Grant Hill committed. They get T-Mac committed. They bring Tim Duncan in. We think like that's going to be the big three. And there's some different stories about that. But one of the rumors is like Doc Rivers, who was coach at the time, like didn't want to let Tim Duncan and his family fly on the team plane. And
I heard about that.
there was some different stories of why it fell apart. And so he went back to San Antonio. Grant Hill was ravaged by injuries. T-Mac became T-Mac and went crazy. But it's one of the biggest what ifs in this town is like if those three would have played together. You know, that's probably rings. It's just a matter of how many. And so that's kind of when it started. And even before that, when I was younger, Shaq left for the Lakers and the Magic in free
You got to
agency.
see a little bit of that.
I didn't remember it from like that level of salary cap and nuance. But, you know, my formative years watching basketball, I was watching free agency and these moves. And so I'm like, how is this happening? How does this work? Why can this team offer him a max contract, but this can't? And so that's really kind of where I started to learn about it.
Gotcha. So your time at Florida State, how was that? Was it like hard? Like, did you know what I mean? Because for me, just being in college, sometimes like I thank God, my degree is in communications, but sometimes it was like a love-hate. Like it was just like so much other extra stuff you had to put into it. Like the sports management, did you have like facing the adversity, like, man, I'm about to be done with this. I don't really feel school anymore.
You know, I think my challenges was like balancing everything because the social party scene at Florida State is undefeated. It's unmatched and, you know, definitely had a lot of fun there. And I think for me, it was never that the courses were too difficult or I couldn't do the work. It was managing my time, making sure I actually did study, did show up to class. Those 8 a.m.s are no joke. And which is funny. Now I can wake up at any time of day and get on a plane or get on a meeting. But back then it was different. And so that was my biggest challenge that I dealt with. And then I would say secondly was figuring out what I wanted to do. You know, I went there thinking, oh, I'm going to work for a team, but I hadn't really fleshed it out anymore. You're like, oh, I want to be the general manager. Well, you don't know the steps it takes to get there, right? Like you have to start at the ground level, you know, scouting and doing basketball operations or football operations, whatever it is. And, you know, really kind of the breakthrough for me happened like my junior year. My first internship was actually at a PR firm. And I didn't know much about PR, marketing. Like I knew base level sports marketing, obviously Michael Jordan with a Wheaties box, like stuff like that, but not much further. And, you know, I was really fortunate at this small boutique agency in Tallahassee. They had a great team. The guy that ran it was previously the managing editor of Sports Illustrated. And they just knew what they were doing. And it was niche, but it was niche in the perfect way because it piqued my interest. And at the time of this, I believe it was 2013, social media was just becoming relevant in a professional setting. So they were, you know, helping brands and teams and athletes, you know, not only with the traditional communications and media strategy, but with social. And so learning about, you know, DMing this reporter to get a response on Twitter, things like that were really interesting and kind of opened my eyes. Like from a professional level, like social media is going to be huge. And I got very interested. And as I went further, every experience I had up until starting with Distinction, I realized the senior executives didn't know social media that much and didn't care to learn it that much because they thought it was a fad and not that important. And so it created a huge opportunity for me just in terms of timing.
Gotcha. So what you call it after being with this company, that's when Distinction started?
Not yet, no. So then I worked for a couple different agencies. I moved down to Miami. I was doing a lot in like consumer PR, a little bit of digital social. I also was working weekends part-time with the Miami Dolphins communications department. So I did get my team experience. But that was really just networking. Like I was not there for the pay, but the experience. I did that for 3 seasons. And then working at this agency, I was really fortunate to work with some brands that had tie-ins to sports, like a swing sensor, weighted training gloves. And they had brand ambassadors who were athletes, guys like David Ortiz, Andre Ward, the boxer. And so some of my job was from the brand side to like, okay, how do we get a interview in Sports Illustrated for David to talk about baseball and his relationship with this brand.
Gotcha.
And then social, it was the same thing. Like, how do we create content and tell the story of this partnership and why it matters? And as I'm doing all this, I'm interfacing a lot with agents, and most of them were lawyers and contract agents who the marketing was like a chore. It was a secondary thing. They had to do it to check the box, tell their clients they offered this service, obviously make them a little bit more money, but it wasn't full time.
Gotcha.
And so that kind of piqued my interest. Like, okay, what if I carve this lane as a marketing agent and represent athletes? And at the same time, I was seeing influencer marketing really starting to take off with my work on social. And influencer marketing was the wild, wild west. You'd have two YouTube influencers with the same amount of subscribers. One would do a video for free product. One would do a video for $10,000. There was no middle ground. And I was like, I don't really see many marketing agencies for influencers and representing them and connecting brands with influencers. And so that was the thesis of distinction, was how do we bring athletes and influencers and creators together? And, back then from the influencer creator side, we were very early. There was a lot of skepticism. I would go on a sales call or to a conference. People were like, we don't pay influencers. You just do that. It's been cool to see that shift.
Got you. And earlier you spoke on, you was there for like the experience, not for the pay. We have that conversation a lot behind closed doors. How do you feel about that sometimes? Like, dude, do you think a lot of people kind of, especially in today's world, try to chase the money too much and not chase like the experience and opportunity, the networks?
I think so. I mean, look, everybody's situation is different, and sometimes people can't afford to not focus on the money first. But my first internship was unpaid. My job at the Dolphins, I'm not going to out them what they were paying, but it was not a lot. And so for me, I found that experience is everything. And you have to, especially in sports, you have to be willing to start at the bottom, do the menial tasks. Like, it's not going to be handed to you unless your father is so-and-so or whatever. Like, you have to be willing to grind, and you have to remember that there's thousands of kids coming out of college every year who want your job, who want to work with us or work with the Dolphins or whatever. And so these organizations know that, and they're looking for the hungry people that are willing to put in that sacrifice.
No, for real, honestly. And so after you working with all these different departments and companies, where did you just sit down, plot, and just say, I'm going to make my own agency after this? When you talk about new lane, what sparked in you was just like, this is where I'm about to start?
It was one of those things, I don't want to say a midlife crisis, but maybe a quarter life crisis of, I'd been working for an agency for about 5 years. I'd worked with the Dolphins for 3, and I just had this itch. Like, I wasn't satisfied, and looking at the job market, like, I could make a nice little jump, but it wasn't what I wanted. And I've never been afraid to fail. I'm still not. If I put all my chips in and it doesn't work, so be it. And so it was really like, okay, what other opportunities do I have? And the entrepreneurial itch was there. A lot of people around me had started companies, my wife's family, a bunch of different entrepreneurs. My father at one point had a very successful side business. And so I kind of grew up seeing it, but not in my industry. No one had done anything like I wanted to do, but I was comfortable enough to say, let me take this risk. And in hindsight, of course, there's things I wish I did differently, and I'd go back and, fix, but I'm happy I made the jump. And, life is just about the experiences and the relationships you make along the way. And what I've been able to do over the last 6 years, like I wouldn't know the things I know about client relations, finance and accounting, law, all those things if I was working for somebody else. You learn those things because you're a business owner.
Got you. So you speak on these things. What did you do? Or I know we talk about like just jumping into distinction. What did you do to build that team and like get that started? Like, what was the keys?
Early on, it was a lean team. We really we focused on building out contractors and freelancers. So obviously we couldn't afford to hire a huge full-time staff.
Gotcha, yeah.
But we could get people for projects, so specialists, right? So like we had somebody who we had worked with at a past agency who was great with photo, video, any kind of creative work, and even websites a little bit. So he was a great person. Hey, we have this brand, this budget, can we tap you in? And we kind of did that in a lot of different lanes. And then wearing a lot of hats, you know, even myself, like I wasn't afraid to do any task, you know, get on a plane whenever I needed, you know, get things done. But we really relied on contractors. Then we started an internship program. We hired within. We've had a few interns that have progressed to full-time employment, which that's been great because you can see them in the system, get to know how professional they are, their work ethic, and then grow from there. And then really just kind of build. And a lot of it too is just having a network. It's not always just the talent we represent or the brands we work with. A lot of times I'll pick up the phone to a partner agent and, you know, I might have a brand and they're like, I need a Chicago Bears player. And this is a true story. And we didn't represent one, but I knew another agent who represented several Chicago Bears players. So give him a call, see if we can make the deal happen. Profit share, everybody wins. So we've been very collaborative as well, because if you put yourself in a box where, hey, I represent these 10 people and the brand doesn't like those 10 people, conversation ends. But if you talk to the brand and say, hey, what are your goals? What are you looking for? Hopefully my 10 are going to fit that. But even if they're not, well, let me figure out this problem for you. Let me find a solution. And because everybody who's, you know, you're selling something, you want to think about how you're going to solve their problems and why they should choose you over somebody else.
Got you. So I want to speak on too. I love this story, but what was some of the hard things you had to deal with just starting this? I want to speak on that. Like just some of the things, you know what I mean, deep down, you're like, man, I'm going to call this quits.
There's so many. You know, one of the hardest things is when you're first talking to brands and talent, they say, well, who do you work with? And I could always fall back on the past experience, right? Like I'd done a campaign with David Ortiz and this person, but are they a client at Distinction? No. And so that was very difficult, right? Like in the beginning, you don't have a website. We didn't even have an email server set up.
Gotcha.
We didn't, like, all the foundational things. It's kind of like building a house. You need your ground floor first. And so that first beginning, like, you don't have anything. You're kind of just hoping to find people who believe in you and tell them that you're going to work twice as hard as somebody bigger because I'm giving them my all, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, our first clients, they had the benefit of, they were the only clients.
Yeah.
So every brand I was reaching out to was about them.
Gotcha.
And that's obviously not possible as you grow and scale out, things change. And so that was really kind of what we held our hat on. The other very difficult thing all agencies face, and we still face today, is getting paid after you do the work, right? Like as a vendor, you know, we'll have a lot of companies we work with and they'll be like, hey, our payment terms are net 60 after completion. Well, if I sign the deal in September, we finish the deal in December, we're going to get paid the end of February. It's a long cycle. We got to wait and have cash still to operate. And so there's definitely a lot of challenges. Recruiting is tough too. We've really focused on finding the right clients and not every client.
And that's what I want to touch on too.
Yeah.
Who do your team specifically say like, okay, I want that guy, or like, this one's not the one we don't even want to deal with them? Like, how do you look at
Well,
that?
we've learned over time, you really need clients who their expectations align with what you can do for them, right? Like if somebody is not realistic and they think they're the greatest of all time, but the truth is they haven't competed in years, well, they're probably not going to be the right fit, right?
Gotcha.
When you're young and just getting started, though, you have that dream, right? Like, I'm going to take this underdog and build him up. And hopefully you can in your career, but from what I've seen, that's very difficult because I don't have any control over the sports side when it comes to athletes, right? Like you're either going to win the fight or lose the fight. You're either going to win the medal at the Olympics or not. I can build you up and tell your story and highlight the positives about you, but the performance aspect I can't change. So finding clients who are realistic in their expectations is huge, and just good people, man. Like we have really focused on building a friends and family like atmosphere in business, which I know is a little cliche, but everyone we work with, we have no problem introducing them to one another. We've done trips where we'll have 7 or 8 clients together. We do like an annual trip to Vegas during NBA Summer League. I think we had 8 clients there, all collaborating, hanging out. Like that's awesome for us. And
definitely.
we've really focused on just working with good people where we're aligned with their goals and expectations.
Gotcha. No, that's amazing right there, Alex. Like, I just love it. You know what I mean? That's one of the reasons I just wanted to hear your story, because it's just a different lane. Like, especially, I would say, coming from St. Louis, we don't honestly know until I got, like, to Dallas. I came to Dallas in, like, 2022, and I seen so many different lanes. And, like, I think even, like, this week was, like, one of my first weeks of, like, my boys, they work for the Mavs, so they kind of always be like, hey, staff, come out, meet some people, network. And they try to always put me on, especially for the podcast. Like Daniel Garford and like Jaden Hardy was at the last influencer event I went to, and just seeing a lot of people that's not even like in the sports world, but just seeing people that's like social media famous and doing their thing and just really relevant in that space is just really amazing. And so just hearing somebody that's an agent and like this really a founder and CEO of something that's, I feel like, upcoming, because when I see your stuff, I just feel like it's so much y'all have already done and so much more y'all about to do. So I just really salute that in a lot of ways.
Appreciate that, man. No, and we, sports bring people together, and I feel like social media does too. Like that's how we connected, right? Like there's that element of in-person connection that can't be replaced, and I find like sports does that because obviously you go to the game, you go to the event, all of that. And then social media, like people who use it with intention and build relationships that translate to real life, like that's really where it goes. And same for brands who are trying to sell their product, like get your product in people's hands and like let people feel, see, touch it. Like you can't, replicate that experience.
No, that's definitely true. What you call them. So what's next for you all, as I would say, for yourself and for your team? What are you trying to do next? And like, what lane are you trying to really tap into and accomplish?
Yeah, no, it's a loaded question. I mean, we're just coming off the holidays, so a lot of time to think, right, and brainstorm for 2025. But we're really trying to scale and grow our team internally and with the clients we're working with. We really are focused too on like, working with great brands that can, ultimately grow with us and our talent and build into those longer term relationships. Not that we won't do a quick one-off for an event or something, but we really want longevity with the talent and brands we're working with, growing our team, and just continuing to build a good reputation in this space. It's challenging, it's competitive. Everyone knows there's tons of agencies. So we really want to be at the forefront when people think of a marketing agency focused on sports and the creator economy. That's where we really want to be known.
Got you. That's amazing right there, honestly. And I know you're a big Orlando Magic fan. What you call him? A lot of injuries. I know. Am I pronouncing his name right? Paolo.
Paolo.
What you call him? He just got back. Are y'all playoff ready? You know what I mean?
So I could go on about this, but they've done an incredible job weathering the storm. They had 8 guys healthy the other night and still beat Philly.
Okay.
But they are 1 game ahead of their pace from last year. They finished, I think, 5th in the East, pushed Cleveland to 7 games, which now that looks really good. Cleveland's the 1 seed buzzsaw. Yeah, and the Magic were right there with them. So I think they'll be playoff ready if they're healthy. If they're healthy, they can compete with anybody. I'm not sure they could beat Boston or Cleveland, but any of those other teams, I could see them beating when healthy, because Paolo's an all-star and Franz Wagner is going to be an all-star, if not this year, next year. He really emerged, especially when Paolo went down, and they've got really good depth, good coaching. I'm excited about that team, and it's really fun to watch. And obviously, this is a smaller city, not as many sports teams as like Dallas, so we really get behind our Magic and excited about these young guys.
I feel that. So I know you're not just an NBA fan, you really tap into the WNBA. How did you really like catch an eye for the WNBA and really start becoming a fan?
Yeah, so I have always been bullish on women's sports. I always felt like they were undermarketed, underrepresented, and when we started our business, I made it a key focus that we needed to represent as close as possible to 50% female athletes. And it was something in 2018 or 19, like it sounded aspirational, but people would be like, well, they don't make money. How are you going to make money? Now, 5-6 years later, it's very clear that that's the future. A lot of investors, they want to invest in women's sports teams because they can get larger returns than the men's sports teams who are already worth billions of dollars. And the W in particular, like, I just love ball, and, you know, they're great players, good people. They're hungry to tell their stories, build their brands. It's a good group of ladies to work with, and obviously all of women's sports, there's so much excitement, and I think they're finally getting the attention they deserve. And we've worked with some female Olympians as well who many times they're getting higher engagement, following counts, and even sponsorship dollars now than some of their male counterparts. So it's exciting. You know, I know I've even seen some firms now that are exclusively doing women's sports, and I give kudos to them. But we really like where we're at, and working with some great women and men as well. It's been a lot of fun.
Gotcha. Hey, that's nice to hear, Alex. I just love, you know what I mean, how, you know what I mean, you came in here and just meeting you for the first time. It's just been great, been a wonderful experience. I appreciate you, honestly, just being on our platform. Before we wrap this up, I just want to say, like, what's some advice you would give to people just trying to do what you do or just come up and be in this type of lane? What's, you know what I mean, what's some inspiration and some motivation you can get at?
I mean, the biggest thing of advice I would give is to be persistent. Like, this is a difficult business. It runs on relationships and what can you do for me and what have you done for me lately? So be persistent, have a work ethic, and focus on serving others. Like, it's rare I'm talking about myself, because even if you go to, you know, our agency's Instagram, for example, it's almost going to be all our clients. You might see 1 out of every 10 or 15 photos have me or a team member, but this is client services, and you have to make it about your clients first. And so, you know, go follow Distinction Agency, go follow our clients. You know, they're all doing amazing things, and honored to work with them.
Gotcha. And what you call them, y'all just had Alex on here, you all, a CEO, founder of Distinction, how you say Distinction
Agency.
I can't even get it out. Distinction Agency, honestly. So just make sure y'all go tap in. Where can they follow you at on social media?
My handle's at Alex Onaindia, Onaindia.
And I just want to say, appreciate Alex Onaindia again. This was great. And I just hope, you know what I mean, in the future, we might get a part 2, part 3 one day. So just thank you for hopping on. Off the rip. Appreciate you, boss, man.
It was good.
That meant the world right there.
Off the Rip.